Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who has spent the last week figuring out how to make Photoshop versions of Julio Jones in a Patriots uniform. Kyle, how are you doing?
I have been. I'm doing very good. I've gone to two nearly full capacity sporting events this month, and honestly, it's felt pretty good. The traffic stinks. I'm not used to that, but just being in those venues and being able to see that stuff, it's been fun to see. So I've really enjoyed having nearly full crowd sports back.
Yeah. So what is it? You went to the boxing match, and what else did you go to?
Yeah, so I went to Canelo Billy Joe Saunders. That was just after Cinco de Mayo, and then Friday, I went to Game 3 for the Mavericks and Clippers. There were 16,000 in the stands for that one. Really good game, and really good performances from Luka and Kawhi, which made it fun too. So,
oh yeah, that's cool. All right, well, good stuff. Before we get too far into this, just letting everyone know, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff. Also, we have the audio-only version of this podcast now. Anywhere you get podcasts, we'll have the podcast up there. We're going to start doing that. So everyone, feel free to check that out. And let's do this. Let's do this at the beginning of the show instead of the end. Kyle, why don't you let them know where our Twitter handles are and everything.
Yeah, make sure to follow us. Like you said, make sure to subscribe below and like this video. Also follow us on Twitter. That's at Jackson Kruger, at by Kyle Grondin. That's GRONDIN, at by Kyle Grondin on Twitter. And then follow our Twitter account for the page for any show updates, anything like that, at On the Sideline JK on Twitter. Make sure to follow us there.
Yes, and without further ado, let's talk about what we will be talking about for this whole podcast, which is we are going to be doing a top 32 draft of all of the head coaches. We're doing draft style, ranking the head coaches. Should be fun. And Kyle, the way I'm doing this is I figured let's do it the same way we did last when we did our top 32 quarterback. I'll give you a trivia question, and then if you get it right, you get to choose. If you get it wrong, then I get to choose. Sound good?
Okay, go for it.
All right. Which head coach has the highest winning percentage currently in the NFL? In
the NFL, no minimum seasons?
No minimum seasons.
Well, then it's got to be Matt LaFleur, right?
It is Matt LaFleur. Ding, ding, ding. Right. Good work. So, yes, Matt LaFleur, 26-6 in the regular season. All right. So, we're going to be counting down. Do you want to go first or do you want to go second here?
I'll go first on this one. I gave you the first pick with the quarterback rankings. So I'll go first with this one. I actually kept my top two as the exact same as last year. I felt no reason to change these two. So I'm going to go with number one, and I'm going with my guy, the coach of my team. I'm still going with Bill Belichick here as number one. I still, for my money, he's the best coach in football. And you know what? I thought even as bad as the record was last season and how bad they looked at times, I can't imagine what that team would look like if Bill Belichick wasn't the coach of it. I thought he had, even in some of the losses, the Bills lost, the Chiefs lost, I thought he had some great game plans too. So I think Bill Belichick is still my number one coach in football. Not very controversial because he's still the best coach of all time in my book. So Belichick, number one.
Yes. Also, to address the question in the chat, can you upload the podcast on Spotify? It should be up on Spotify. We should have that. But yeah, I totally agree. This is number one. This seems like the obvious number one. Like, okay, you win, all the Super Bowls he's won. Is it a little worrisome that since Tom Brady won a Super Bowl, it clearly means that Bill Belichick had nothing to do with the Patriots dynasty? None of his Super Bowl rings count, not even the two that he won with the Giants.
Yeah, none of that counts. Even those two against the Rams where he had great game plans, those don't count either. It was clearly just all Brady all along, because, one guy can't win the Super Bowl and the other also be great,
Yeah, no, it's always one person solely. And, one slight thing I'll talk about with Belichick, I love how he uses stunts. I think it's a great way to get a lot of pressure without having maybe necessarily the most talent. They got more talent now. Should be interesting. Any final thoughts on Belichick?
No, I agree with everything you said. I mean, I think it's interesting too because he's not a guy. I think you did it in one of your videos too. He's not a guy that invests a lot typically in pass rushers, and
Mhm.
it's seen time and time again. Guys like Richard Seymour and Chandler Jones, they're not afraid with trading those guys because they still manufacture pass rush pressure and they have a great secondary to help it. So yeah, I mean he just does a lot of things really well. He's not afraid to be different, and I think there's some criticism to he's seen some criticism to the GM Bill Belichick, which I think some of it's fair. I think some of it's really unfair, but I think some of it is fair as far as drafting skill position guys and identifying talent there. But it takes nothing away from his coaching and his ability to game plan his team no matter the situation and change his style no matter what.
Yeah, I agree. And we should be clear about that. We are just ranking coaches, not just how are you as a coach. We're not factoring in the extra stuff because, like, for example, John Gruden, we know that he probably has some impact into personnel, but we don't know what exactly. So we're just ranking the coaches. Let's move on to number 2. I have kept my top 3 the same. And number 2 last year, I had Mike Tomlin, and I'm keeping Mike Tomlin. I'm a big Mike Tomlin guy. Until he has a losing season, I'm going to continue to be a big Mike Tomlin guy. So I've been a big Mike Tomlin guy for a while. He's someone who, like, his teams don't have his down years are 8-8. Even last year, I feel like they didn't have a ton of talent, and they were able to win. I believe it was 12 games. I know that the playoff losses, that's a real thing, and that has been a little bit of a factor. But I do feel like there is a bit of luck there. I mean, what's he supposed to do about Ben Roethlisberger turning the ball over like 4 times immediately out of the gate? It's just hard to really prepare for that. I don't think you can blame him for it. His teams are always well coached. He's maybe the best motivator style coach in sports. I think he's here at number 2.
Yeah, I actually bumped him down to 5. I don't remember where I had him last year. I didn't keep my list actually, but I moved him to 5. And really, the problem is like I just kept looking at it, and I was like, should Tomlin probably be higher? Yeah, but there's just guys I was impressed with that I ended up putting above him, and it's probably unfair to him because he's still an incredible coach. You can give them, you can criticize the Steelers organization as a whole for how they finished the season. But when they started 9-0, I think he deserved a lot of credit because I think a lot of people looked at that team and, Steelers fans were in the chat all the time saying, oh, why is Ben Roethlisberger not getting MVP consideration? Why isn't the Steelers team talked about going undefeated? Well, we looked at that team and said, this really isn't an undefeated team. And I think a lot of that goes to him and his ability to prepare this team and put it on the football field. And it's the most organized team in the league sometimes. So I think Tomlin deserves a ton of credit for that, and he did a good job last year.
Yeah. I also answer a couple questions in the chat. Are we talking about historic or currently? We're talking currently, as of right now. And the podcast name on Spotify is the On the Sideline Podcast. On the Sideline Podcast. So, but yeah, I mean, exactly. I think you can make argument for other guys. There's 5 I have in the top tier. You could make him 5. I don't have a huge issue with that. Let's move on to number 3. Where are you going?
Yeah, so I went with the guy I had number 2 last year. I still think, there's no reason for me to change these 2 off of the top 2, so I just left him there. And that's Andy Reid for me. Andy Reid is still my number 2 guy. He's in number 3 here. Still, in my mind, the best offensive mind in the game right now. I think he's creative with everything he does. He utilizes his strength, whether it's Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, Chad Henne. I think that he does a lot of things really well. And, he has a ton of trust in his players too, which I think is kind of an underrated attribute. Not a lot of guys on 4th and 2 in their own territory are throwing the ball with Chad Henne at quarterback to win a football game and clinch that win. He managed to, do it. And I think he gave the credit to Bieniemy for the call, but at the same time, he deserves a ton of credit for, letting that go and not punting and, not being conservative with that play with Mahomes out. He went out, they went out there and went for it on 4th down, got it, and won the game. I give Andy Reid a ton of credit, and I still think he's a brilliant coach.
Yeah, Andy Reid, his scheme is electric. I guess people are, ha 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 says Tomlin over Andy Reid ? And part of the reason why I do feel like I have Tomlin just a little bit ahead is, listen, I know Andy Reid won a Super Bowl a couple years ago, but there still is those playoff, concerns. You want to talk about Mike Tomlin's playoff concerns? It's bigger for Andy Reid. Also, there's a lot of thunder. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but I think there's like a massive storm going on over here. I have a good microphone. Maybe you can't hear it, but anyways, if you see me get struck by lightning at any point, you'll know what happened. But yeah,
I guess I'll end the show at that point.
yeah, just finish the show off, right? Make sure we get the full hour. But no, I mean they're both amazing, and again, you could easily have Andy Reid at number 2, and X's and O's wise, I do think Andy Reid is number 2, if not number 1 at this point.
Yeah, like I said, I think he's brilliant. I still think, just in terms of even, it's amazing that, throughout all these years, he's been able to evolve and still be, fantastic. Just in terms of play design and situational awareness, I think he's the number 1 coach in the league. I think he identifies matchups. He identifies where he wants his guys to be. And yes, he's got a super talented team, but he also takes advantage of it. So I do think he's creative. I think he's incredible. And I think he's a very good coach. I mean, you don't make back-to-back Super Bowls without that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's go to number 4 now. I have a change here in my list. So I looked at my list. So what I did was I made my list, but then I looked at my list from last year just to compare and see how I feel differently. But I didn't want to. I made my list first. I have Sean Payton here at number 4. Sean Payton, again, coming off of kind of a similar Sean Payton-esque year. I feel like the kind of some concerns I've had with Payton have been, I feel like he can get a bit whiny. And, there's like the whole, after they lost to the Rams, I understand the frustration, but I also think that he could have turned the mirror towards himself and said, these are some issues I have. Like this is what we need to get better at. And I think you saw the next year in the Minnesota playoff game, there were a lot of complaining about calls when it was actually a pretty evenly called game. And I think that you got to overcome that stuff. That being said, again, he's another incredible X's and O's coach. He's probably the biggest innovator offensively on this list. So I give him a ton of credit for that. It'll be interesting to see what he does without Breeze, but it's hard to imagine things will go horribly because, again, X's and O's wise, he's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had Sean Payton 4th too. I think there's something, listen. I mean, he lost Drew Brees for part of the year, and we go back and forth on this all the time. I felt like there had been regression in Drew Brees' game, and especially the arm strength. But, there was regression in his game, I thought. And he lost Michael Thomas for a lot of the year last year, too. And the Saints were 5th in scoring. They're 5th in points scored for the season.
Yeah.
Nothing deters this guy from being a great offensive coach. This guy manages to get points no matter what. He's got a really talented team around him, which also helps. But I just think he's an incredible coach. And I think you could find a high school team and he'll manage to put up 14 points somehow because he's just so creative with the ball and it doesn't really matter what his personnel is.
Yeah. And, now there's the whole Jameis Winston experiment. Hey, if he makes Jameis Winston reach his full potential, he's number 1. I'll put him up there immediately.
I saw somewhere online, I can't find the source, so I can't, credit them or, make fun of them. They had projections for next season, and Jameis Winston's projections was 30 touchdowns and 13 interceptions.
Well, hey.
I was like, in what world is that happening? But, if he manages to do that, then Sean McVay's number 1, or Sean Payton's number 1 next year.
Hey, I'm sure people could look at some of my hot takes and say, Kadarius Toney, number 1 receiver? What is this guy thinking? So I'm not going to throw stones in my glass house.
So, yeah, I mean, I just thought that was interesting projections. But, yeah, if he manages to do that, like you said, if he manages to do that with Jameis and limit the turnovers, it'll be a incredible performance from him.
Yeah. All right. Number 5. Where are you going with this?
All right. So this is the guy I had number 3. Like I said, I had Tomlin 5. I had Peyton 4. I think people cooled off on him last year because he, part of it was he got so much hype. And, I thought some of it was it was well-deserved hype. And then he bounced back and had a great year, like I thought last year. I'm going Sean McVay here. I thought McVay, I think he's underrated as a football mind as a whole. I think because of his background and everyone touting him as like the next genius on the offensive side of the ball, I think his whole his whole football mind and the way he, manages his team, I think is really good. I thought that he did a really good job last year of managing the game on offense because he knew he had an incredible defense. And, I thought that he did a fantastic job. So I'm giving Sean McVay the credit here. Number 5, I think he's an incredible coach and an underrated overall football mind.
Interesting. So, he went 9th. He went 9th last year. So now he's up to 5 this year. And I don't hate it. I really don't. I mean, I had him at number 6 now. So that's pretty good. I would say, the Rams, they finished 25th in points per drive last year. The offense wasn't spectacular. A lot of that probably was with Jared Goff. Probably McVay, maybe his best attribute, even though he is such a good offensive mind, a big part of what's made things work is the fact that he's done such a good job of just hiring defensive coordinators.
Yeah. And, part of it is too, as we're going to talk about a few other offensive coaches later, understanding your defense and what you need from your defense also matters. Just because you're an offensive guy, that doesn't mean you're exempt from defensive criticism because you're the head coach. Unfortunately, that falls on you just as much as the offensive stuff does. So I give him a ton of credit for that too. And I just give him credit for, managing the game. I think a lot went wrong for the Rams last year offensively. Who was the lineman that got hurt at the end of the season last year that really kind of derailed them? Whitworth?
Maybe. He got hurt at a certain point, yeah.
Yeah, and then, Cam Akers struggled to get up to speed. He was really good by the end of the year, but for the first half of the year, he kind of struggled to catch up to speed with that. I thought he dealt with a lot last year, and, I thought the Rams were still I still thought the Rams were a fantastic team, so I think they're going to be really good again next year.
Yeah, we have a comment. I'd have a hard time taking McVay over Kyle. Someone would take you ahead of Sean McVay. High praise for you, Kyle.
I mean, if I were on this list, I'd be number one probably. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on now. Number 6. I thought you might go with this. John Harbaugh. He went number 4 last year. He was the other guy I had in the elite tier. I do think that, it's kind of a weird situation. You could argue, like, the offense has looked a little bit stale. I do still think that, again, maybe team building is hard to really. He's one of those guys where it's hard to quantify exactly how much credit do we give John Harbaugh, right? Because he's a special teams coordinator. So, hey, they got Justin Tucker. Special teams is great. But, I do feel like typically sort of the way he's built this team, he's so open to new ideas. The whole analytics thing, he's kind of started that trend. I know that maybe last year wasn't his best year, but I don't think we can forget that. So he dropped a spot in my ranking, but only 1 in my ranking.
Yeah, I guess this is probably controversial. I moved him down to 7. I don't know what it was. Things kind of just felt stale for Baltimore. And part of it was probably really unfair because they were so incredible the year before. And I just don't know what it was that I, can openly criticize them about. I thought they had a lot of trouble, on offense last year. It's never a good sign when people are saying, hey, they're calling out your plays at the line of scrimmage. And I think part of that also has to come down on him that, I'll be interested to see how he responds next year because I think part of the things that they thought was that, okay, we'll just roll back what we did last year, which was obviously fantastic, and keep going. But now that teams are kind of catching up to what they're doing, especially on the offensive side of the ball, how do then the Ravens readjust and then go about their offense?
Yeah, I really think that their lack of receivers hurt them. I said, they don't need receivers. Lamar Jackson, no one's going to play man against them. Lamar Jackson runs them out of it. Well, no, actually, now teams started playing man. And like the Patriots, for example, they played man coverage and just sort of had their defensive line play contain, not even worry about rushing him. No one's getting open, and there's nothing he can do. That's kind of the nothing Lamar can do. I think that it's hard. You can't coach better than your talent. If you don't have the talent, it's not going to work. They need some guys who can win in man. Maybe Bateman's that guy. I think they should trade for Julio. But I think that the lack of receivers was the bigger issue with the offense. And yeah, the offense is predictable because there's only so much you can do when you have a one-sided offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I'll be interested. Like I said, I think I'm interested to see this team next year because if they have a great year again and respawn and bounce back, I mean, this is a team, he could easily be in the top 3 next year because he's had years where he's looked like a top 3 coach in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. All right, number 7, where are you going?
Okay, so I thought you would jump at this guy a little earlier than I did. I actually had him at number 6. I guess, this could be kind of hot takey, but I got Frank Reich. I thought Frank Reich did an incredible job with Indianapolis on both sides of the ball. I think he's got a really talented team. He manages it really well. And, it was a really tough year the year before because, he lost his starting quarterback basically a week before the season. And then he bounces back this year with Phillip Rivers, who, wasn't fantastic. And he put together a really good offensive season for this Colts team. I think it's a pretty good team overall, and I think he's a good coach.
This is a little bit hot takey, but I like it. I respect the take, even if I don't agree with it. I had Frank Reich at 10. So last year, he fell all the way to 20. But I remember when he fell that far, we were both kind of like, how is he 20? He should be way better than this. I like Frank Reich a lot. I think that I love the way that he's sort of, got the defense under control, which I know he's an offensive coordinator, and he did a great job with kind of lesser talent on offense, I thought, last year. So he's clearly knows what he's doing. He won a Super Bowl for Philadelphia. Few guys I have ahead, but I do think that he's really good, and he's in this next tier I had.
Yeah, I mean, this may be kind of like buying high because I think the Colts can be pretty good at next season. But we'll see overall. I think he's a really creative coach, and I think he just does a really good job of game planning for his team. And I think that, I think if we see a revitalized Carson Wentz, is there any doubt that he's a top 8 coach next season?
Probably not. I mean, for one thing, I wrote 6. He's number 7. Poor job by me on the graphic on the screen. But I mean, probably. I would still say there might be. It depends. I mean, I think that he could do really good though. Again, if he wins a Super Bowl, then yeah, he probably goes to top 8.
Well, yeah. I mean, not even necessarily winning the Super Bowl, but if they win the division and Wentz looks like his old self, then that's a conversation where, clearly, I think a lot of people have accepted that he deserves a lot more credit for Philadelphia than what he got. And then B, that this guy is just a really good coach. And, even guys who take a dip in form, he's able to bring them back and make them look competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I guess the one maybe knock, he did choose Philip, the Colts themselves. Again, we're not factoring this in, so I guess I shouldn't talk about it. But, the Colts chose Philip Rivers over Tom Brady. That's going to sting a little.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Tom Brady would have went to Indianapolis, but I guess that is a choice that they made. So
we'll still made a choice, though. I mean, they didn't offer him a contract, so maybe he wouldn't have. But
yeah, I just don't know because of the rivalry that he would have ever even considered it.
Maybe if he really does hate Bill Belichick, which according to all the people at Fox Sports and on ESPN say he does. Yeah, whatever. I don't even need to finish that joke. Let's go on. Number 8 here. I'm going Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott up from number 11. I have him here at 8. There's a couple other guys I considered, but I don't know. Again, he's just one of those guys where it's like Buffalo just seems to do everything right, and he's completely transformed the culture. I still stand by. He made one horrible mistake, which was he thought that Nathan Peterman could be a starting NFL quarterback. Other than that, he's had a pretty flawless run in Buffalo, and they were a win away from going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I also had him at number 8. I think he's an incredible coach. I think he does a really good job of, getting this team ready to play. And listen, I think that there's like this going belief in football philosophy that when your team fires a coach, you need to get the newest in vogue offensive coordinator to, be your guy. That's what you have to hire. That's just the next thing to hire. And defensive coaches are just forgotten. And Sean McDermott just kind of said, you know what, F that. I'm just going to be a really good head coach. And he's done a really good job with Buffalo. And it's not just even the defense. It's just the offenses that have performed too. I thought he did a great job with choosing Brian Daboll for his staff, trusting Brian Daboll. And also I think he understands the game really well and is just a really good coach on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and there's the whole, Josh Allen has developed very nicely, and I don't know how much credit to put on the head coach, but it's on someone in the coaching staff, and he hired those people, so it all goes back to McDermott. So I think he earns this number 8 spot. Why don't you go to number 9 here?
Yeah, so I got the coach of the year. I got Kevin Stefanski. I mean, I've said multiple times on this podcast how much I'm a fan of Stefanski and his ability to coach, and just his offensive management. I don't think anybody comes up with a game plan and how they talk about those first 15 plays of a game are usually scripted. I don't think anybody scripts an offense better than Stefanski. I just think the way that he manages the game and runs the football really well. And, it's the same thing too, where he's utilizing his skill set, whether it was Minnesota as an offensive coordinator or in Cleveland, he understands the skill set of his team and he maximizes it. And I think that's a really good credit to an offensive coach. And I think he's proven that he can be a really good coach in the NFL. So I give him the credit.
He's probably my hottest take on this list. I have him down at 15, and it's not because I think he's a bad head coach. It really isn't. Up from 26 last year, so big jump. But it's more so I just kind of questioned if any of the coaches I had above him were to coach of the Browns, would they do better or worse? And I feel like it's better for all of them. Like, there's a lot I like about Stefanski. He did a good job of sort of saying, okay, this is what Baker's good at. Let's have him do what Baker is good at. But I also don't know how much credit I want to give him for that. It's kind of, they had a ton of talent. That's kind of part of why I'm a little bit lower on Stefanski, perhaps. And plus, their defense was just awful last year. Part of that was personnel. I get it. Only so much you can do. But again, when you have a great offensive line, you have two great running backs. You have Baker Mayfield, you have Odell, you have Jarvis Landry. Had Odell for half the season. It's not that difficult to have a successful offense, but a lot of guys couldn't do it. So he's still a top half of the league coach for me. I just think there's a few guys I still have ahead.
Yeah, and part of this also goes to management because I think I had him higher than you did last year too, if I remember. And one of the things I'm just a fan of is that I think management did a really good job of understanding what he likes to do and understanding the best guy for their offense and for their roster. And I think they hired the best guy for their roster, and he's really shown that he can be a great head coach.
Yeah, and that's another part of it was I didn't know how much credit. I love the Browns front office. If we're doing front office drafts, they're going top 5. I think they've been incredible, but I just wasn't sure how much credit to give to him. Just the coaching, the X's and O's are it's good. It's good. I like it, but it's also kind of makes me think man, Freddie Kitchens really didn't know what he was doing more so than Stefanski is awesome, but he's still good.
Yeah, I think this is I think this is going to be an interesting season for him just because, I think a lot of it was kind of playing with house money almost. That it's oh, the Browns are good. This is fun. Look at them making the playoffs. Good for them. Now it's going to be, he's going to be in a lot of big games. We're going to see his management at big games and, playing really good teams too. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Browns stack up against those teams and how he manages those games.
Right. If they have a first round, if they had a first round exit this year, no big deal. If they do it next year, now all of a sudden, that's a problem. Any final thoughts on him?
No, I think we covered. I've raved about Stefanski all the time, so we can move on.
All right, Kyle Shanahan here at number 10 for me. I think Kyle Shanahan. He was number 8 on my board. He was number 7 last year. He's still really good. I know that the team got banged up with injury, but he's the kind of guy where he can give yourself. I've talked about. I made a whole analytics video and talked about the positional value. Well, he can give your team a top 5 running game without a top 5 or even a top 20 running back, which is incredible. And, quarterbacks always seem to do well in his system. Last time we saw him with a good quarterback was Matt Ryan, and they had one of the best offense in the league that year. There's a ton to like about Shanahan. And I feel again, if he maybe get a new training staff, get a new guys that, can help with the injuries, because I don't know what's going on there. But other than the fact that they're snake bitten, Kyle Shanahan's been awesome ever since he's been a coach, even though the record might not show that.
Yeah, I really struggled with these. The guys I had 10, 11, and 12, I really struggled with. I ended up putting him 11 of that group of 3. It's really hard to judge because, we see the pedigree and just say, okay, this guy's fantastic. He clearly understands the game of football, especially on the offensive side. If we ranked offensive coaches, he might be number 1 or, at least top 3 at that point. It's just really tough because, he's going to be he's in our top 10 here and he probably deserves it, but it's also a losing record still. And I know a lot of this isn't his fault, but it just makes it really hard to judge in my book. That's why I ended up putting him 11. So, I think it's completely fair. I can't argue against it at all. I just moved him down to 11 because I didn't want a guy in the top 10 with a losing record, even though a lot of that isn't his fault.
Yeah, I guess it's fair. He also did a great job of hiring a defensive coordinator who's now a head coach, Robert Saleh. So, all right, we can move on. Number 11, where are you going?
All right. I ended up going with, like I said, I struggled with 10, 11, and 12. I moved Shanahan down to 11 because I'm picking Super Bowl champion Bruce Arians at number 10. Listen,
okay,
this guy gets a lot of flack for a lot of things, and I think some of it was justified. But at the same time, I said this a couple times on here, when we made fun of running the ball on first down, I think we saw in that Packers game how important running the ball on first down was, because by the end of the game, they had kind of worn that Packers defense out, and we were able to, kill some clock when they needed to and make some plays. We saw it in a few other games with them too, that just running the ball and wearing down the clock, I think, matters. I think he does a good job of that. I think he's just, players love playing for him, and I think that matters to an extent, and I think he is a good coach in that regard. He's a Super Bowl champion for it, and I think it's well-deserved. So I'm giving Bruce Arians the nod here.
Interesting. I had him at number 13 on my list. He was also 13 he was drafted 13th last year, so I had some sort of consistency there. To me, I still feel about this, and it seems like you do as well. We both kind of feel about the same way we did about Bruce Arians, maybe a little bit better, but I still say all those first down runs drive me crazy. Like doing it every time, like it's
Yeah.
still not. I get that it worked out in a big playoff game, but like it's still not what you're supposed to do. Especially when you have Tom Brady and all these offensive weapons. The fact that he doesn't have an analytics department drives me crazy. Again, I've talked all about my frustrations with Arians, but easily the best thing about him and what he did was he brought a winning culture to Tampa Bay. And that's so difficult to do, is get your team to believe that you can win. Tom Brady came here, but Tom Brady came here because he believed in the team. And Bruce Arians created a team for Tom Brady to believe in. So that's why he's so good. It's so hard to quantify that, but just because you can't quantify it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's why I still am a big Bruce Arians fan, and he still is a really good coach, even if he's maybe not a top 10 coach in our opinions.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like, I think, there is a lot of things to be frustrated about with Arians, but at the same time, a lot of his stops he wins. He's had a lot of success in this league for a number of years. And whether it's an analytics department, whether it's understanding the benefits to throwing the ball on first down, all the stuff. I think that there is a benefit to just what he's able to provide to a team and being able to provide winning football teams.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's hard to quantify, but it exists. All right. So number 12, this is my pick now. I am going to go with another guy who has coached in the NFC South, but does not coach there anymore as soon as this. Well, the banner's not loading. Ron Rivera is my pick. Here we go. Ron Rivera, number 12. Again, Ron Rivera, a defensive-minded coach. His defense was top 3 in points per drive last year, and that was without, I think, the best talent. There were some issues. It's not like their talent was incredible. When you're a good defensive-minded coach, you have a top 3 defense. You're going to be, he was number 9 on my list. He was number 16 last year. I think Ron Rivera is really good. Oh, you there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's lost signal there for a second. But yeah, I mean, I have Rivera. Gotcha. I had him 15th. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's very creative on the defensive side of the ball. And, he just gets guys to play. I thought that's something that he did really well last year. And that defense really proved it. I think he has some frustrating things on offense. I think the Riverboat Ron thing's a little bit played out sometimes. But, at the same time, there's just something. It's kind of the same thing with Arians in a way where there's just something about guys like, guys want to play for. So I think that there's something to it, and he's one of those guys.
I mean, it beats cancer and takes a horrible Washington team to the playoffs in the same year. Hell of a year for Riverboat Ron.
Yeah, it's a very interesting year for him, and I believe in him as a head coach. That's why I had him at 15. He's still in the top half. You have him here a little bit higher, and it'll be interesting to see now that they've added some more offensive talent to this team, where he can, can they win the NFC East again and, make some noise?
Yeah, and also maybe, get to 500 also, the more difficult task.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, number 13, where are you going?
I have Flores here. I saw enough from Brian Flores in year 2 that I've been impressed. I think that, he's proven that he's a very good defensive coach. He's come from that Bill Belichick tree. And I don't think he's a slouch either on offense. I criticize a little bit the Tua, moving Tua up to the starting spot because it seemed like Ryan Fitzpatrick put them in a better position to win football games that season. But at the same time, it was a long-term approach. They didn't worry, I'm not sure. I think they wanted to make the playoffs, but at the same time, they wanted to make sure Tua got those reps too, and that's going to pay dividends, I think, for this year. I'm not out on Tua yet by any means, even though he did struggle at points last season. So I think it'll be a good year again for Miami. And it's one of those things where it's like, you talked about Arians and his culture. This was a franchise that struggled for a number of years before he got here. He just brought a different culture into this team, and it's worked.
Yeah, he replaced Adam Gase. That's what he had to deal with. Like that's the team that he's dealing with, and he's completely turned them around. They were nearly a playoff team last year. And again, like we talked about, he's a defensive-minded coach, and his defense is top 5 in points per drive. Like, how well do you do the thing that you're supposed to do well at? Well, his team's really good defense, and you could argue that there isn't even the best personnel there. It's a lot of the way that he's able to scheme things up. It's similar to that Belichick of, get good secondary guys and we'll scheme up the pressure. They do a great job at that. I'm a big Flores fan. I had him at number 12. I'm all in on this pick. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah. I mean, I believe in him as a head coach, and, he may have a little bit of a small sample size, but at the same time, he's proven to be, the kind of guy they need on that team. So I think he's going to be very good. And I think Miami is going to be good next year, and it's not really being talked about.
Yeah. I think it's getting talked about somewhat.
I don't know. I mean, listen, I think people are talking about the Patriots this offseason, and, they're a popular team and they've done a ton this offseason. People are talking about the Bills. I think Miami's flying a little under the radar for a team that was nearly in the playoffs last year.
Maybe. I mean, didn't we also say that they weren't on our list of teams that were going to make the playoffs next year?
Yeah, it was. So maybe we're sleeping on them too.
Yeah, that's something I've thought about. Again, as I've sort of looked into positional value, maybe I'm sleeping on them a little bit. Also, another guy getting slept on a little bit, I think, here, number 14 pick. You see it on the screen already, Matt LaFleur. This feels like a steal getting him here at number 14 a little bit. He was higher on my personal list. He was number 11 on my list, 10 last year, goes to 14. Again, I think a lot of us have sort of a bit of a sour taste in our mouth on LaFleur for that field goal decision in the NFC Championship game. I think that's just a call you can't make. But at the same time, like, again, offensive-minded coach who leads his team to number one offense. I get Aaron Rodgers is a huge part of that. But it's also, great offensive line and Devontae Adams. But, Aaron Jones. So, there's all this talent there. They could use a couple receivers maybe. But, again, like we said, best winning percentage out of all these coaches. It feels better than a 14 spot. But, again, there's just a lot of good coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's definitely caught up to the league. I had him at 13. I mean, it was kind of tough to judge him because at the same time, there certainly is a benefit to coaching Aaron Rodgers for your first 2 years of the NFL,
Mm-hmm.
And while I think there's been some small changes, I don't think he's changed a whole ton to this team on the offensive side of the ball, which is, he was this offensive innovator. And then I think, the field goal on 4th and goal last year in the NFC Championship game is something that people criticize. I think there are some management decision issues that he has had throughout the seasons, and I think that's something that he's going to have to, it is still only his 3rd year as a head coach, so I think it's something that's going to adjust and change. I think he's going to be a very good coach, and I think he's going to get even better, though, so I think this is buying a little low on him.
Yeah, and also, sure, Aaron Rodgers, but he's won 13 years in back-to-back years. Before that, in the last 2 Mike McCarthy years, they won 13 games combined in those 2 years. So he's doubled the win total then. Rodgers was hurt for a large chunk of one of those years, so that's part of it. But again, Rodgers was healthy and they won 6 games in 2018. He takes over back-to-back 13. They added some help on defense as well, but still, I think he's a very good coach. We want to move on to number 15?
Yeah, so I got Vrabel here, who I had at 14. I just love me some Mike Vrabel.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's, I think he's ballsy. I think he's another guy who I think trusts his players, which is something that I think is important. He did a really good job of hiring Arthur Smith too, which is another thing we've given guys credit for, and I think he deserves the credit for the same thing. And I'm going to be interested to see how it goes without Arthur Smith this next season, because I think very highly of Arthur Smith as an offensive-minded football coach, and I think that could be a big thing that changes this team. But I still believe in Vrabel overall. I think he's a very just smart football mind, and I think he's a very smart defensive coach too. And I think he's going to be I think Tennessee is going to be just fine.
Yeah, I mean, he is the definition of that motivator coach that basically he has to hit on both coordinators to have success. I don't think he can I don't think he's a good enough defensive mind where he could just take over a defense and be fine. I think he needs to have a good defensive coordinator. That's my opinion. And the offense especially so. But he's so good at the motivation stuff. I totally agree. I have him at number 17. He went 18th number 18 last year. So good head coach. Just I think this feels about the right spot for him, right in the middle of the pack.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a good head coach. I think he has some things that he needs to figure out. I think he makes some mistakes here and there, especially with management decisions too. But at the same time, he's hired good coordinators, like you said, and I think he's going to, if they manage to hit on the offensive coordinator, the Titans are going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. And even, again, how hard is it to? At the same time, too, it's like, you got Derrick Henry, you got Ryan Tannehill. There's ways to make that work, even if you don't have a superstar offensive coordinator.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think it's going to be fine. I got Vrabel here. So who do you got at number 16?
Number 16, I'm going. All right, Raiders fans, here you go. John Gruden here at 16. He was number 14 on my board. He was 15 last year, so he actually moved up a spot weirdly on my list, which I don't know why. But again, we're separating the personnel from the coach. He's a good coach. Like you talk about his offense, believe was finished 8th in points per drive. So like the offense does its job. To me, the reason why he's fallen this far and why he's kind of in that middle of the pack range is simply because it's like had Paul Gunther as his defensive coordinator for 3 years. He needs to figure out this defensive situation. Perhaps he has it now with the new defensive coordinator coming in, but that's the real issue. Is the defense has been very poorly coached. I know he's an offensive minded guy, but when you're a head coach, you got to figure that stuff out as well. So that's why he's at 16.
Yeah, I had him at 19 because, the same reason I gave McVay credit for, hiring the right guys on the defensive side of the ball. And also, I think being a good overall football coach, I got to criticize Gruden for the same thing too. Gunther clearly wasn't the answer for this team. He let it go for much longer than I thought he should have. And, the Raiders, probably missed a playoff spot because of it. I don't know if, any other defensive coordinator would have saved the season, but at the same time, I thought it would have helped for sure because Gunther clearly just wasn't the guy on that side of the ball. So I think that was a tough situation for him. You're right, though. The offense scores. The offense puts up numbers, and it's always going to put up numbers in a Gruden coach team. But, yeah, I mean, he's got to be able to have this defense fixed because the way he's paid, I don't think, missing the playoffs can't happen again with this team. It's got too much talent, I think, overall.
Yeah, exactly. I believe he's like 500 now as a head coach, too, which is crazy to think. But yeah, there's stuff to like, stuff not to like. That's why he's here at 16. 17, where are you going?
All right. I am going to go with, I guess, by my calculation, this is going – oh, no, sorry. There's one more. The second to last coach with the Super Bowl pick, I'm going to go with Pete Carroll. Kind of similar vein a little bit to the Vrabel thing where you said master motivator. This guy clearly gets guys engaged and ready to play football. Whether or not Russell Wilson likes, some of the decisions made is a different thing altogether. And, he continues to show results of winning, even though you have a lot of frustrating things about Pete Carroll and his philosophies that are a little old school in my book. It's a similar thing where he just continues to get results of winning football games. So you got to give him credit there, and that's why he's 17 for me.
Yeah, this feels like, Pete Carroll, I think, has fallen the most out of any head coach last year. In fact, I'm almost positive he had. I drafted him at 6th last year to show how far he's fallen. Now he's at 17. And the biggest issue I had with him is, he kept saying, like, okay, let's run the ball a bunch. They finally opened up the offense, and it worked fantastically. I mean, it had some issues in the end of the season, but especially early on, it was working great. And then for the defense, it's like, I feel like there is talent there, and the defense is really underperforming, in my opinion. Like the defense should not have been the worst defense in football ever through the first like 7 weeks or whatever it was. And they kind of figured it out towards the end. But like in that Rams playoff game, it's like, why are you just playing like a base cover 3 this whole time? There's too much frustrating situations for Pete Carroll. This might be he's been there too long. He needs to get a new scenery or something. Again, they did win 12 games. You're right. They keep winning, and that's the head coach's job. But it's kind of like, sort of similar to what we see with LaFleur. Well, where would Carroll really be at this point in his career without Russell Wilson? Obviously, historically, he's incredible head coach. We all know that. But as of right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the criticism with him are fair. I can't fault a lot of the criticisms, and I think I had them I had him somewhere around 10 last year, if I remember correctly. So he fell in my book too. I think I had him at 16 by the end of these rankings. So he's fallen in my book, but at the same time, like I said, he continues to win. So there's only so much I can hate, but at the same time, like you said, there's a lot of decision making that I think is frustrating with him. I'll never understand. I didn't watch a lot of the all 22 footage, but I'll never understand how this secondary fell apart. I was looking at this secondary like, oh my gosh, this is the best secondary in football now. Before the season, I think I said that after the Adams trade. It clearly was not the best secondary in football last year. And that's something that he's, That's his one specialty is secondary. And he had all these talented players in that group, and it just didn't work out. I'll be interested to see how that responds next year because I still believe in some of the talent of those guys. Obviously, Jamal Adams is a superstar. So I think he's a very good coach, and I think they're gonna be good again next year because he continues to win.
Yeah, I think it was like the New England game when there were some injuries in secondary. So they start having Jamal Adams play as their free safety in this cover 3, and it's like you might as well have Bobby Wagner playing free safety. Like it doesn't make any. There's some decisions like that. It's like he's married to the cover 3, and again had great success with it, but now had some issues. And but again, at the same time, you're right, keeps winning. Let's move on to number 18 now. Here's a guy who I love a lot of his X's and O's, but didn't win much last year. That's Mike Zimmer. Defensively, again, I always say, you get him some good, talented defense, and he's going to turn it into an elite defense. That's what he can do. The concern of Zimmer is really one major thing, and it's I just don't like how this offense is ran. I just don't. And I know that he's the defensive guy, but you hired the offensive coordinator, and this run-heavy offense, it just doesn't work. You have Kirk Cousins. You have Justin Jefferson. You have Adam Thielen. Use Dalvin Cook, sure, but don't only use him. Or if you're going to only use him, then trade away Adam Thielen or Justin Jefferson and get a corner or something. Because this is just I just don't like how it feels like a waste of potential there. And there's a reason why the Vikings offense, despite the fact that, again, they have just insane amount of talent, they only finished 10th in points per drive. Like they should be way better than that.
Yeah, and with all of that, I think they finished 11th in scoring this past season, But, the thing is that I think, he's moving on now to his third offensive coordinator in 3 years, which I think is tough. I think it's been a tough situation for him. And, as far as that defense goes last year, as good of a defensive coach as he is, because I really like Mike Zimmer too, but I kind of had to dock him after last season as well. As much as I like Mike Zimmer, there's only so much he can do with the personnel. This team had bad players in the secondary that were really affecting them last year. And, there's only so much he can do with that. I think they're going to bounce back this season. And it'll be interesting to see how the new offense, I think Kubiak's kid is actually taking over as the offensive coordinator from Kubiak, which is interesting. But, we'll see how it goes. At the same time, like if the offense regresses next season even further, I wouldn't be shocked either, despite there being talented players on that team.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on him?
Is he on the hot seat for you? Because I feel like he, is, but I don't know if he should be.
I kind of feel like I think it would depend. I think if they go 7-9, I think he keeps his job. I think if they bottom out and go 5-11, I think he gets. I think as long as they go 8-8, I think he has another year. But I think if there's a mediocre year, then his seat is very warm.
Well, what if he goes 8-9?
Oh, right. Well, I was assuming they were going to tie at some point. That's why I threw that in there.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like he's being talked about on the hot seat, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But at the same time, like you said, if this team ends up with a 6-win season, I could also see him gone, and I don't know if he should be. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Zimmer this next year. I think they bounce back a little bit, despite another offensive coordinator. I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, so he's the last guy I had in kind of this tier. I think it's a little bit of a drop off to the next pick. Where are you going here?
Yeah, so this is kind of where I had the separation. A lot of this is either first or second year guys or guys who I think are on the way out potentially. I'm actually going to throw a first year guy in here, and I spoke glowingly about this guy a little bit earlier, kind of teased the situation. I believe in Arthur Smith. I believe in Arthur Smith as a head coach. I believe in him as an offensive mind. I think he was, I think there is a short list of guys who I would vote for. Like if we did a coordinator of the year award and we had a short list of guys, I think he would have been in the top 3 the last couple of years. I think that highly of him. I think he's that good, and I think he's going to be a good head coach, and I really like him with this Atlanta team, in this Atlanta roster. I think it's going to be fun to watch this team next year. I think they're going to be sneaky and competitive next year. I think a lot of people are picking him as a sleeper, though, so I don't know how sneaky it actually is. But even if Julio Jones isn't on this team, I believe in Arthur Smith, and I think he's going to be a good head coach.
Yeah. Also, there is a Coordinator of the Year award as well, but I believe Eric Bieniemy won it last year.
Well,
yeah.
News to me.
Right. So, yeah, it goes to show, I think that really says more about the prestige of the Coordinator of the Year award than anything else. So, I had him lower. I had him at 27. He goes at 19. But to be clear, the highest I had I put all of the first year head coaches in one group, and I had the highest at 24. So it's so hard to say because like the classic example I have is Vic Fangio, who maybe the most qualified guy to be a head coach ever, and then he comes in and he's on the hot seat this year, like, and could have been fired. So it's just so hard to tell with rookie head coaches more than anything else in football. It's the biggest wild card.
Yeah, I jumped the gun on a couple of these guys, and I think I think highly of a lot of these guys, and that's why I ended up having. I think I have like 3 guys in the top 23, starting with Smith here and then moving down. And then I have the other guys a little bit lower, like you said. And the guys who I think are going to be fired at the end of the year, I kind of put for the bottom, even though I think, it's kind of unfair to rate them below first year head coaches. I just, personally rated them at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, fair enough. So we'll go to number 20 here. This is the guy who I already talked about, a former Panthers head coach. Let's talk about the current Panthers head coach, Matt Rule, coming in here at 20. I think Matt Rule's gotten a bit overrated. That's just kind of my opinion a little bit. I'm not saying he's like a bad head coach by any means, but there is a bit of like, it seems like people are completely convinced that he's like this superstar head coach. Like, well, they won 4 games last year. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. But at the same time, like, yeah, there is a lot of stuff that the Panthers did well. They're going through a rebuild, but now to have a bit more talent, I'm still not in love with the Sam Darnold move, but that's not what we're evaluating, only the head coaches. And I think that he could have some success, but I am a bit worried if Sam Darnold doesn't work out, could he be on the hot seat heading into 2022?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, especially, Teddy Bridgewater saying on the way out that he didn't like a lot of the practice stuff. That's a whole different conversation, but at the same time, the results
let me say, I don't think it is a whole different conversation because how many 1-score losses did they have? And a lot of the thing was like they didn't like practice red zone and stuff, which from what I understand from people that talk are into NFL, like they say like, no, you got to practice red zone a ton. And that was a huge reason why they lost.
Yeah. So maybe this changes things for them, though. Overall, though, because, I think before last season, I said I thought Panthers talent-wise were one of the worst teams in the league, and McCaffrey got hurt almost right away. And I was like, this isn't a very good football team. And I thought the results showed that, he did a pretty good job with this team, despite, I thought a huge, a ton of talent on them and being in a tough division. I thought he did a good job with this team, and I give him a lot of credit for that. We'll see how he adjusts some of this stuff and goes into year 2 because, sooner or later they're going to start asking for results. And I think he's a good coach, and I believe in him as a talent developer and identifying talent. It just depends on, can he bring this team up to the next level?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And again, I think what we talked about with him in college, right? It was often bad first year, but then second year jump. We'll see if they can do that. You want to go to 21 now?
Yeah, so I had Rule at 21 on my list. I had one other second year head coach above him. That was Joe Judge, who I'm taking here at 21. I had him at 20. I think, I was very pleased with a lot of the stuff I saw from Joe Judge. He can't help that Daniel Jones is his quarterback. So, I thought he showed that he's a good coach. He almost won the division, sadly, with that team. And, I could kind of see this as a Flores situation too, where it's like, not a very great roster around him, but, kind of, over exceeded expectations in year 1. And then year 2, he really, could go out and win 10 games because I think that, he gets these guys to play. And I wouldn't be shocked if that happens with the Giants. It's not what I'm betting on or anything like that, but I wouldn't be shocked just because I believe in him as a head coach.
Yeah, he's another guy. The Flores comparisons happen a lot. Him and Rule, I kind of feel like I had Rule at 19, Judge at 20. And I felt kind of very similar about both of them, where I'm kind of just like, people keep going crazy. Like, people are like, oh, look at this guy. Look at and I'm kind of just like, I haven't really seen that much from him. I do think that the Giants defense itself was very well coached, which I don't know how much, like, he's a special teams coordinator. So it's like, how do I know? Special teams seems fine, I guess. I don't know. Like, it's hard to really know how to evaluate it. And the team won 6 games last year. So not like that crazy. But again, they do feel more confident. They took the world champs to the brink of a win. I mean, against Tampa Bay, that was a very close game that the Giants just weren't able to pull off. So we'll see what he does next year. They have more talent, and this could be a year that we really get to see more of Joe Judge. But there were flashes of good stuff from him last year.
Yeah, and I think that's the tough thing is, you look at these, him and Rule specifically, and, they got a lot of credit for, you know, making competitive games out of a team that didn't look competitive. But then,
Hmm.
part of being a head coach is that, results are expected quickly and, you're going to start wanting to see winning those games. And this offense was by far the worst in football last year, or at least worse in the NFC last year. The two New York teams were the worst in football. But, one of the worst football offensive teams. He hired Jason Garrett, which is something I question. But, they still were managed to be competitive despite all those things. And we'll see how it goes in year two.
Yeah, they finished fourth worst in points per drive on their offense, but the they got 1.69 points per drive. Jacksonville got 1.68, and Philadelphia got 1.67. The Jets 1.36. They were horrible, but that's where every other team landed up. So it was very close. They were basically one of the worst offenses in the league. So we'll see how that cleans up. Got a lot of talent in a second, so we'll see what happens. Number 22. This is my pick. I am going with a guy who was at one point sort of this hot commodity everyone was excited about. I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury here at 22. Cliff Kingsbury, he was number 23 on our draft last year, so didn't exactly like change too much. I think I kind of feel pretty similar about him. There's some intrigue. I want to see what he does with sort of a number two receiver kind of, but at the same time, I kind of feel like he had guys that could have been a number two receiver and just didn't really do it that well. There was a bit of a lack of creativity with DeAndre Hopkins. And so I do wonder, maybe this could be Kingsbury's last year. And there were some just inexcusable mistakes, during last season.
Yeah, that's fair. I ended up moving him down to 27 because like I said, I think he's one of these guys that I think might not be around next season. And I'm just not sure where he's going to end up as far as this goes. I think he needs to, like you said, for a guy who's heralded as this brilliant offensive mind, I think there is some things that he does really creatively. But like you said, a lot of it just said, hey, Hopkins, please catch this ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see more of, scheming to get Hopkins into space and get Hopkins into mismatches rather than, hey, just run out and hope you catch this kind of thing. And I think that he's got, it'll be interesting to see how they change that this next season and, if he can keep his job going into the season, the following season.
Yeah, it should be interesting. There's one guy I might have put a bit above him as well, but we'll move on. Number 23, where are you going?
I guess I'll take Matt Nagy. I mean, this is kind of out of spite. I don't really know how to rate Matt Nagy. He's another guy who I think could be on the way out. He's had some really good years and he's had some bad years that, I've openly criticized. Some of these games we talked about the Bears a lot last year because you were higher on them than I was. I didn't love a lot of his decision making. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him next year because if it goes south on him, I think he's on the way out.
Yeah, and again, we talk about what do you do that you're in charge of. His offense was a bottom 10 offense last year. And I know, yes, Mitchell Trubisky, yes, the offensive line injuries, Nick Foles, whatever you want to say. It's like they also had Allen Robinson. And there were just times when it just didn't look good. And I get it. There's a talent thing. I also feel like for Nagy, there's just kind of weird, like people want to say, he's underrated now all of a sudden because they drafted Justin Fields. It's like, no, I still don't think he's that great. I still don't think there's a ton of good stuff here. Now, he's won a lot. I mean, he doesn't lose games, and that is his job, is to help win football games. But I think a lot of that is due to the great defense that he inherited more so than Vic Fangio was there, and he was able to lay the groundwork for that defense and kind of get them to sort of have those, know what to do in that point as well. So it's fine. I have a couple spots. I think I might have him at 23 on my list, but like I'm not too optimistic. I would be betting on Matt Nagy to be in his last year as being a head coach.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, which is a shame because I want to see Justin Fields have some consistency. So maybe they fix some of these things, but at the same time, there was a lot I watched last year that were just so frustrating. I felt like he didn't know something. Like it just seemed like when it was Trubisky in, he wasn't playing really to Trubisky's strengths. And then when Foles was in, he wasn't really playing to Foles' strength either. And they're two very different quarterbacks. And I feel like he didn't really understand how to game plan for these guys and maximize this team on the offensive side of the ball, which is something that I think he's supposed to be great at.
Yeah, exactly. I could. Hey, just throw it to Allen Robinson every play.
Yeah, I mean, he could. It'd probably
Yeah,
be better than the offense they had last year.
right. Exactly. Okay, let's talk about another guy that I'm going to go Vic Fangio. I had him 22, and I considered I probably should have had him. I think I might even like feel like I probably should have had him above Kingsbury now that I think about it. But whatever. He goes here at 22. I drafted him goes here at 24. I drafted him 14 last year. I was very high on Fangio, and again, I stand by like the defenses are awesome. Like every defense he's ever had has been incredible. It's just been his complete inability to get a competent offense. It's you do have to put some blame onto him. So, yes, defenses are great. I think it is an incredible job. If he gets fired, maybe 29 teams are going to give him a call, seeing if he'll be their defensive coordinator because he's that good. But as a head coach, they haven't been that successful.
Yeah, and the offense and the injuries have been frustrating, and they've started the injury bug again early this season, which is even more frustrating. But at the same time, yeah, like you said, he needs to get the results. He hasn't really, Drew Lock clearly wasn't the answer, and he didn't make the change when they needed to, and then he got hurt, and it made matters worse. And there's just a whole lot going wrong for Denver last year. So I want to see him be successful because I like his defensive game plan. I like what he can do as the defensive side of the ball. But he also can't abandon the offensive side of the ball just because he's not that guy. I mean, you look at the difference between him and Sean McDermott. McDermott has bought into the guys on the offensive side of the ball. He's also hired the right people on the offensive side of the ball, but I think he also deserves some credit for how he's managed that side, and it's no longer just a defensive side for him. I feel like that's kind of the difference between these two.
Yeah, and another thing, and that is a real part of it too also is if you're a great offensive-minded head coach who struggles at a defensive coordinator, you can work with that a lot better because offense matters more in the NFL. Statistically, there's just a bigger gap in how much points you can get offensively than defensively. So that's another factor. Let's move on to 25 now. Where are you going?
All right, so I got another rookie head coach here. We're getting close to just about all rookie head coaches and some other guys.
Yeah.
So I got Brandon Staley. This is another guy I'm really bought into. I loved him as a defensive coordinator last year. I think he's really creative on the defensive side of the ball, and I think he's going to be a good head coach. This is someone I'm buying high on or buying low on. I think he's going to be really good for the Chargers and what they want to do. Staley comes in here at 25.
Yeah, he was actually 25 on my board. I do still have one rookie head coach ahead of him, but this feels right for me. Again, it's so tough to tell with these things. How well is he going to be? We don't know how good of a leader is he going to be. But, last year, the Rams are really well coached, and part of it was great personnel. For sure. Will it work with lesser personnel? Because they were kind of creative in how they did it with a lot of disguises and things like that. But it'll be interesting to see. We'll see how it works out. But he's in one of the better situations. So I'm all in on this. Want to move on to 26?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Number 26, I am going with a guy who I think was maybe got, I believe I said like he's one or two in terms of the coaches I'd most like to have. And the other one was Eric Bieniemy, who didn't get hired. So this makes it an easy number one for my pick of my favorite rookie head coach. That is Robert Saleh. I thought Robert Saleh, again, you talk about the motivational factor. We never know, but you watch him on the sidelines, you can tell he's a motivator. He's always yelling. He's always screaming. Guys love him. Richard Sherman said he was very unhappy when Robert Saleh didn't get a head coaching job last year. And the defenses have been incredible. He did that Seattle cover 3 last year, but then this year, when it wasn't working as well, he immediately changed it up and did different things, which I like. I like a coach that's willing to do new stuff. The X's and O's seem good, and the motivator stuff seemed good. And, he hired a good offensive coordinator, in my opinion, in Mike LaFleur. So a lot to like about Saleh. He goes here at 26.
Yeah, I don't know if I like this just because there's way too much positivity coming out of the Jets camp about what's happening. That just leads me to believe that this is doomed to fail. And I like Saleh and I like his defensive game plans. So I agree with everything he said. I think he's a really creative defensive coach. That cover 3 works for him. He's got pretty good players on that Jets defense that I think he can work with too. Not a ton of great players, but I think there's some good talent on the defensive side of the ball that he can use. And, I don't think they're going to be great next season, but I think he's going to, this could be one of those situations similar to Judge where he gets this team to shoot above its weight and maybe they pull off an upset of Miami or Buffalo, and then people are excited about the Jets next season.
Yeah, I love Zach Wilson. I love Robert Saleh. I love Mike LaFleur, but they play for the Jets, so I think that there's like a 50-50 shot that this will work out.
We're gonna have to get you like a Jets jersey or something.
For
We're all
real,
in on this
yeah, I
too.
know. Yeah, I don't know how it happened. All right, we'll move on now. Number 27, where are you going?
All right, I'm going another rookie coach.
Hmm.
Urban
Also, just to
Meyer.
set it up, okay, you go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. There's only two non-rookie head coaches left, by the way.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
Urban Meyer comes in here. I had him just below Salah. And listen, if we're going to talk about head coaches, at least we know he can be a really good head coach. I know the transition from college to pro has been suspect for a lot of coaches over the years, but I mean, this feels a little bit different when you're talking about one of maybe the 5 or 6 best college football coaches of all time now coming to the NFL. Some of the decision making, I think, early on has been interesting. I'm not a huge Brian Schottenheimer fan, who they hired as the offensive coordinator, but at the same time, you know, he's won national champions. He's got huge accolades, and I know it's not in the NFL. I do believe Urban Meyer is going to figure it out eventually. It may take a year or two for him to figure it out, but I think he's going to figure it out in the NFL eventually and be a good head coach.
Yeah, there's such a weird, all this stuff of like, we've seen great college head coaches not do well, not work out. Nick Saban comes to mind. You also have guys like Pete Carroll who have worked out, or guys like Jim Harbaugh who worked out for a few years and then flamed out. So basically anything can happen. And I don't really know that much about Urban Meyer. Remember, I'm not a huge college football fan. Like I kind of know some of it, but I'm not like a super like I don't know as much about like college as I do about the NFL. So it's going to be interesting for me. I had him at 28. I had a few guys that he was actually my third lowest of the 7 new coaches, but that's mostly just because I have no idea anything about him whatsoever. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, I think he is going to figure it out because I think he has a smart football mind. It just depends on how long it's going to take, and can his style of play? Because one of the biggest criticisms, even though I think judging quarterback based on their universities is one of the worst decisions ever.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State quarterbacks haven't translated, so can he get his offense to translate to the NFL level?
Yeah. And hey, one thing I talked about was the Trevor Lawrence kind of he was in a very collegey offense, which maybe they'll just say we're going to try college offense. I don't think that would be a smart move, but maybe that's what we'll do. I don't know. Number 28, I am going with a guy who a lot of people seem to dislike due to, I guess he had a bad press conference where he kind of fumbled over his words a little bit, because that's the number one thing that matters in head coaching is how well of a first press conference do you give. Nick Sirianni, Eagles head coach, number 28. I had him at my third favorite rookie head coach. And the reason why is just because I just feel like, he's currently, like, we talk so much about how much we love Frank Reich. Well, he was the offensive coordinator last year for them. Like, there seems to be a lot of good there. I do feel like they're kind of trying to replicate what worked when they won the Super Bowl, but like at the same time, I know it's kind of weird because you let Frank Reich go and now you're hiring like a guy close to Frank Reich. It's almost like you're a girl breaks up with you and you're like dating her sister or something. Like it is a weird thing. It's an odd situation. But if any other team hired him, I would be a fan of him going in. So I'm a fan of him going in for Philadelphia.
Yeah, the thing that I thought was so interesting with this is I felt like at the time when they did it, I thought it was a save Carson Wentz move because they wanted him back, and they got the guy close to the guy that he liked and respected, obviously, with the guy who Sirianni was close to Frank Reich. And then obviously they traded him after the fact. So I thought it was interesting. I'm curious to see how this goes. I think it's going to be tough sledding for him. And I don't think the situation should affect the coaches, but I feel like this situation could affect them because I just don't think there's a ton of talent in this team right now. And I think it's going to be tough sledding.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. It's going to take a little bit, but we'll see how it works out. Also an analytics guy, I like that. But let's go on to 29 now. There's 2 rookie head coaches, 2 non-rookie head coaches. Where are you going?
I'm gonna go with Dan Campbell.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, the tough thing is, like, we don't know a lot about his coaching acumen because he, didn't call plays in New Orleans. He was the assistant coach, I believe. But hey, there's, if he hires the right coordinators around him and it works out, that's good for him, because I think the one thing he's come in and done is he said that he wants to establish an identity to this team, as goofy as it says that we want to bite people's kneecaps off. He wanted to establish the identity with this team, and then he's seemingly gone out and done it. He's established this big, strong, potentially really good offensive line. I think DeAndre Swift's going to have a pretty good year with this team next year. And I think that they can be, this big and menacing team next season. I don't know if they're going to win a ton of football games, but I think they can just go out and be nasty. That's the identity he wants, and I can see it.
Yeah, and again, he's the biggest wild card because they're hiring a motivator head coach who, former player. He was a former head coach he was an intern with the Miami Dolphins for a minute. So he does have a little bit of experience. He clearly seems like the kind of guy where it's like they just want to have a guy through a rebuild that the players will like. So I totally understand the logic behind. I have him at 28. Again, I don't know how much you can talk about because he's clearly just a guy who's going to be a motivator. But I hope it works out because he's an entertaining character.
Yeah, we need more of those guys around.
Exactly. All right. So, number 30, we have two guys who we've seen coach for multiple years. One guy we haven't really seen coach at all. But I remember last year I said, we were talking about the rookie head coaches, and I said, I know nothing about Joe Judge, but I'd rather a guy I know nothing about than Adam Gase and Matt Patricia. And I feel the same way about David Coley. I'd rather have him than Zach Taylor or Mike McCarthy. So David Coley here at number 30 for me. Again, I get it. He's the kind of guy. I remember I did a whole thing on this when he first got hired. Everyone was freaking out over it, and I kind of said, look at all these horrible locker rooms he's been in. He's been in was with Andy Reid, where he was through those rebuilds year after year. He was with the Ravens when they lost that game to the Titans after going 14-2. He knows what it's like to go into a locker room where people don't want to be there, and that is what Texans locker room is going to be. I think his job is be there for a couple years, help the rebuild, and then get fired. But I think he'll do that part well. So he's a unique head coach, and that's why I have him at 30.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation because it does kind of seem like he's made as the sacrificial lamb here. Mm-hmm. But, he seems like a pretty likable guy, and he seems like a guy who, can get guys around the team to kind of buy into the system. Now, there's not a lot of talent around that system, so it's not like it's going to matter. This team's going to be bad. But, if there was any guy that I'm rooting for just as a head coach, Campbell's probably one, and he's probably two, because Campbell's the personality. But this guy came into the worst situation. He took this job. He's a legacy kind of hire because he's been around the league so long, and really it seemed like nobody really wanted this. And he ended up getting the job, and I wish that this would work out for him. It's just hard to envision a scenario where this actually works out.
It very much is. It's the worst situation I can think of in quite some time. And, I believe he's 65 going into his first head coaching stint. So, hey, good for him. We'll see how it works out. Two guys left. Which head coach are you going to pick at 31, which will also decide who is 32?
I guess I'll take Mike McCarthy.
Okay.
I mean, he's... Everything we've said about Mike McCarthy is true. I mean, he's frustrating. Last year was frustrating for them. I mean, he's already, potentially losing the locker room in his first season, which is something that's never good. I think the one thing you could say about McCarthy with, they were down in all these games, so that's probably what affected it so much. But hey, those first 5 weeks with Dak Prescott, the offense looked pretty good. And a lot of that, like I said, was with them trailing in games, so they were playing catch up. But at the same time, you can hang your hat on that and say this is why he got another year, but there was really nothing to look forward to from McCarthy last season.
I'm so frustrated of Mike McCarthy ruining good seasons from good quarterbacks. I'm just done with it. I mean, the last two, he with Aaron Rodgers, how many times did that happen? Where the Packers were struggling to make the playoffs too. Like even before that horrible stretch where they won 13 games in 2 years, they were struggling to make the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers. Now he goes to Dallas. And it's more of the same. When that goes down, the offense was not great. They ended up finishing 21st in points per drive last year. So, again, I get it. You lose your starting quarterback, but still, there wasn't a lot of good there. There was that horrible fake punt on the Thanksgiving game that was just like, that's one of those, like, that's a legacy call for Mike McCarthy, but not in a good way. Complete inability to have their defensive coaching was the worst side of the ball. It was the worst coach defense in the league last year. It just was. And it was worse than the worst coached offense as well. It was abysmal. And I just don't get why Dallas made this move. I don't get why he's getting a second year. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I haven't seen anything. I guess he read a couple Pro Football Focus articles, but I think he needs to read a couple more.
Yeah. It's so interesting because the benefit of the doubt with him is that he lost so much offensive lineman and quarterback. But at the same time, like, even though his results weren't great last year, if Kyle Shanahan inherited this team and had the same situation, I think Kyle Shanahan figures out some stuff on offense that it doesn't look so abysmal, because that 21st is also being, carried by how explosive they were in those first couple games. If Kyle Shanahan's on this team, what do they look like in that situation without Dak Prescott? And McCarthy's supposed to be an offensive guy. He's supposed to be on the offense side of the ball. That's supposed to be his thing. And he didn't manage to fix anything with this team.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, again, even that weird stuff, right, where he said like he lied in the job interview of, he said that he watched every single game, every single play last year, and that he didn't. It's like, I watched every single play the past 2 years. It's not that difficult to do. It's like you watch NFL Game Pass. It's 8 hours a week. Like, how is that the thing you're lying about? It's just a weird situation. I don't know. Maybe he'll smash more watermelons and they'll win a Super Bowl, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. That being said, the Cowboys are probably winning the division this year.
Right. So there is some logic. And again, there's always a chance these things work out. It's just, from what I've seen of him, I'm betting against him. And another guy, last on the list, I got to select him because he's the last guy, Zach Taylor. He down one spot from last year where he was 31. So not a great start for Zach Taylor. And again, I mean, first year, worst team in football. Second year, the fifth worst team in football. So I don't know, maybe next year it'll be ninth worst team and you keep building from there. But again, I know Joe Burrow got hurt. It's just sort of the part of that is his fault too. There was I believe it was an Alex Rollins video talking about how like they kept doing empty sets and they kind of were the system kind of forces Burrow to get hit a lot, which is an aspect as well. So again, I feel bad. Like, there is a chance this could work out, and Cincinnati, they might give him another 5 years until it works out. But there's just some, the whole offense as a whole, or the whole team as a whole, it hasn't been successful. And when you've been that poor, it's like the Hugh Jackson thing. I don't care if he's looked good as a coordinator. When he won one game in 2 years, I'm not interested. Zach Taylor hasn't been that bad, but he's not been good.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with this. I had him at 31. Did you have McCarthy or him at 32?
I had him at 32 as well.
You had him? Okay. I ended up having Coley at 32, but I mean,
I see.
Yeah. So
makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, there's just, even as bad as this team's been, there's not a lot that you've watched from them to be like optimistic. I don't know about anything that Zach Taylor that I'm like, oh, that's promising. This could be a promising situation. There's nothing really that I've seen from him that says that he's elevating this team, even if it's bad. And I think that's part of the problem with Taylor, even though it's been, unfortunate circumstances, is that it doesn't seem like anything's really improving. Other than getting Joe Burrow, it doesn't seem like anything's getting better about this team.
Yeah, there's a come on, Bengals are so bad before he came in. That's just not true. I mean, before he came in, they won 6 years the year before, or 6 wins the year before, 7 wins, 6 wins, and then 12 wins. So, they were like a 6-7 win team. He comes in, they win 2 games and then 4 games. Like, that's significantly worse, even if they weren't that good. So it's like, no, he had very low expectations and somehow got below them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like he and McCarthy are on their way out, it feels like, although we'll see, because, Jerry Jones the last decade or so was, slow to fire Jason Garrett, and maybe McCarthy sticks around, and then we know the Bengals history of this. So if you were to bet out of this list, first coach fired, who would you pick?
Ooh, maybe, again, no coach feels like a first coach fired, but maybe Mike McCarthy, just because like Jerry Jones could get some like publicity that way.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, if this goes south on the Broncos or Bears, it feels like that could be over sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah, I feel like Broncos might be a good one. Vic Fangio might be a good one, but again,
Yeah.
it's tough. No one feels like a surefire one. All right, so that's our show. Kyle, any final thoughts before we head out?
No, this was fun. I enjoy doing these coaching rankings, and it's kind of tough because it's like how much do you judge coordinator coaching also along with this? But
Right.
as far as head coaching rankings, I think this is a pretty good list, and I think we rated out pretty well.
Yeah, maybe next year we could just do ranking all like just ranking the coaching staffs and just do all that together.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll have to figure it out. We can tinker with it. It's still only our second year,
Hmm.
going on our second year. We're 1 year in, so figuring it out as we go.
Yes. All right. So, everyone who watched, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Thanks for all the polite discussion and everyone being very agreeable. No one ever mean in the chat, so we always appreciate that, and especially no one's ever mean in the comments. So appreciate that too.
Yeah, yeah. Go. You guys rock. Keep tuning in, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
Yes, we do seriously appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.